Hi YouTube! So let's talk about nootropics, specifically noopept. First, what is a nootropic? There was this guy, he was known as pretty much the godfather of brain pharmacology and competitive performance research. And he proposed some criteria for evaluating whether or not a substance fits in with this nootropic descriptor. Whether you want to call them supplements or drugs, they must first enhance learning and memory function. Second, an improvement of learned behavior when conditions are set to disrupt them. Third, they must be neuroprotective, and finally they must be extremely low in toxicity with few to no side effects. So nootropics or study drugs, they're pretty controversial. You've probably seen them on the BBC or something. And I think the controversy is mainly around three topics. So first of all, obviously the ethics, the fairness of taking a study drug. So people who are using them to get ahead. What if someone's using them during an exam? A second kind of aspect of controversy is obviously their adverse effects, particularly when there's so many gaps in the research. And thirdly, the final one, which is for me the trickiest one, is when should something be prescribed for medical use? When does it become recreational? When does it become medical? It's a difficult one. So back to noopept. On a chemical level, it's a synthetic peptide, which means it's a short chain of amino acids. So it's designed to be really fast acting, which is one of the first things that distinguishes it from other nootropics. It's supposedly 1,000 times stronger than paracetam, and this is because it has a much higher bioavailability, which means it's metabolized much more efficiently than paracetam or others in the racetam family. So other than being one of the strongest nootropics readily available, what's the big deal? And as usual, it comes down to money. It's super cheap, it's super affordable, and online you can be looking to buy maybe 10 grams for like $20. And that means if you're taking like a standard dose of, let's say, 20 milligrams, just to confuse you by swapping currencies, that's about 15 pence a day. So for like young students, it's actually an option. So what does it do? Its primary effects can be summarized in three ways. So it's obviously a cognitive enhancer, and this is via some portion of paracetam's nootropic effects, and this is up for debate. And then it promotes neurogenesis, which is the process by which neurons are formed via the BNF and the NGF expression. You don't really need to know necessarily what that means. And the third thing is, if we're talking about a treatment for anxiety, it's got an anxiolytic effect. Okay, let's talk about duration. So the drug's effects, you're going to notice it maybe between 10 and 20 minutes after you've consumed it, and this is when your intake method becomes really important. So probably the most common method is taking it sublingually, so putting it under your tongue, waiting for it to dissolve. Lots of people also take it orally, so for example in capsules. This is the slowest way that it's going to be absorbed. And then also lots of people snort it. And then obviously like the health effects on your your mucous membrane, I think, is debatable, but yeah, lots of people do that, and that's gonna give you effects almost instantaneously. When we're talking about duration of the drug, this is where things get really anecdotal. So for me, things are kind of active for about 4 hours after taking it, and this is when the effects start tapering gently off. But this is when we need to ask, like, oh, have you had a coffee that day? Have you been for a walk? How are you feeling generally? All these things are going to interact. Some people say a dose will keep them going for a good, day. Other people are pretty much non-responsive to the drug, and they won't feel any tangible effects, but then maybe looking back on things, they'll be like, whoa, that essay was written so fast, or actually this week I've been really on things in the morning. So it's really hard to make comments that will apply to everyone. So in terms of dosage, an active dose is somewhere in the range of 10 to 30 milligrams, which is much lower than other compounds that offer similar effects, for example in the racetam family. The designer of the drug, what would you call it? the original manufacturer suggests that you start with 10 milligrams and work your way up, and I do think that is a good guide. You could even start even lower, but that's the thing, lots of people do start with the 10 milligrams and they really don't feel anything, and they might be non-responsive to the drug generally, or they might find that if they do 25 that it works for them. So the effective amount is influenced by body weight, whether you've taken it sublingually or orally, and if you've had a bad experience and you've simply discovered that you took the wrong dose, doesn't work for you, so probably lower it. Okay, next on to legality. So in the United Kingdom, this is an illegal substance. It's illegal to produce, supply, and import this drug. This was under the 2016 Psychoactive Substance Act. But in the US, for example, it's a legal dietary supplement, and in other places in the world, for example, Canada, Australia, it's legal to import for personal use. And obviously in Russia, where it was originally manufactured, its current treatment for memory loss associated with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Some more tea. So let's get into this review. Let's talk about effects. So I'm going to list a whole bunch of effects, and these will rarely, if ever, all happen simultaneously. Again, as I said, many people feel no real tangible effects, and for me, I really believe in the power of placebo here. So yesterday I was deciding to experiment with caffeine, and I had several decaf coffees throughout the day. And I'm someone who thought I was pretty addicted to my 2 cups of coffee a day, but actually I felt fine for the whole thing. And I obviously can't credit it totally to caffeine. Coffee is a complex compound. But yeah, I believe in the power of placebo, especially when it comes to nootropics. So I think part of the reason why I've been successful with noopept is because I've wanted to feel the effects. And I've read up about the substance before I've taken it and been like, okay, right, I might feel a mood enhancement, so I've probably, we can't say anything conclusive. So physical effects first. So the most obvious thing is stimulation or wakefulness. The stimulation which noopept presents can be considered as primarily subtle and encouraged rather than a forceful or distinct stimulation like MDMA or something. Similar to caffeine, we'll say. Some people also notice other spontaneous physical sensations like what we call a body high, which can be described as faint, maybe soft all over, and consistent tingling sensation. Again, this is pretty variably reported. Visual effects. Okay, I have never personally felt visual effects, but people describe the acuity enhancement, maybe color enhancement, colors appearing more vibrant, but again, this is largely anecdotal. So cognitive effects. This is obviously the main appeal. One interesting thing to note is that studies generally focus on memory formation and BDNF, this thing that helps you retain information. Whereas anecdotal focus, we see lots of people talking about personality and mood. So to talk about the cognitive enhancements first, thought connectivity, focus enhancement, thought acceleration, motivation enhancement, maybe memory enhancement is a big one. And then in terms of mood regulation, a big one is the anxiety suppression. And we notice this in animals and humans, so they've done lots of tests on rats. Again, in rats, for stress, noopept is reported to lower the stress-induced protein activity in rats. And there's a bunch of other things that people are talking about. So it could potentially prevent symptoms of diabetes. It might slow the progress of conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, like in Russia. Even a reduction of inflammation in rats and an increasing of white blood cells. An interesting one is aiding of thermoregulation. So I have really bad circulation, so that's interesting to me. And finally, noopept might lower your risk of strokes by preventing blood clotting and defending against lipid oxidation. So yeah, it's interesting, but obviously the big thing that people talk about is safety. So it's deemed to be safe in clinical trials by the registered Russian manufacturers, but formal research on noopept is currently limited to animal studies, and toxicity and long-term health effects of recreational noopept use don't seem to have been studied in any scientific context, and the exact toxic dosage is unknown. And this is because noopept has very little history of human usage, and anecdotal evidence for people who've tried noopept within, online communities such as Reddit suggests that there doesn't seem to be any negative health effects attributed to simply trying this drug at low to moderate doses by itself and using it sparingly. So generally, side effects don't seem to be too problematic, but at high doses, things like short-term memory loss, irritability, nausea, headaches, feeling overstimulated, this jitters that we associate with maybe caffeine or something stronger, and sleeplessness. So if you're someone who suffers from insomnia, you wouldn't want to be taking this anytime for 4 to 5 hours before bed. That sounds so bad when I list it like that. Other people have talked about at high doses this kind of, we could call it brain fog, feeling a bit like they're stuck in a dream. Other people might feel like they get locked into this over analytical thinking pattern. They begin to, feel a little bit like a robot. And then another big concern is obviously potential for abuse. At the moment it seems pretty low risk, and it doesn't seem to be capable of causing psychological dependence among users. But again, if we look at anecdotal evidence, some people say if they've been taking, say, even just 15 milligrams each day for a couple months, then the couple days after when they stop taking it, they might feel a little bit off, a little bit weird. Some people that might bother them, other people it wouldn't. So it's kind of about finding what is comfortable for you. Me personally, I don't like that feeling of dependence, so that's something I'd be really wary of. So it's something I would definitely cycle and make sure to take regular breaks. So, my conclusions. Why would someone use this? Obviously, when I think about nootropics in general, the first thing I think about is people using these substances to study, to work, or work harder, work longer. I typically think of, Silicon Valley, people working in the tech industry, and I think, this definitely could be really helpful for people looking for that. So let's say 10 minutes after you take it, you might feel your cognition beginning to change slightly. For me, I maybe feel like ideas start to come to me slightly quicker. I feel like I'm able to come up with more creative ways to approach any type of condition, whether that be, maths problems or essay writing. A nice way to test this, because after all, if you're taking any drug, you've got to play a little bit with it by yourself, kind of find what's right for you. So for me, a nice way to test that I'm on the right dosage and see if I'm actually getting the effects I think I am is come up with a little test. So this could be, you get yourself a little Sudoku to do every time, or I heard someone using Duolingo, a language learning website or app if you've not heard of it, and that will give them daily tests and they can track their progress and how quickly they're managing to get through the quizzes and stuff. So for me, this is maybe something I'd like to do for a couple of weeks. Some days I'd be taking noopept, maybe some days just after a coffee, maybe some days, right when I've woken up in the morning and I'm feeling totally normal. So yeah, this is definitely something to play with yourself. For me, the biggest, the biggest area of my studying that I found this helpful for was definitely for long-term memorization of things. So I'm learning Mandarin Chinese at the moment, and in terms of memorizing characters, I have terrible memories it is. And of course it's really hard to attribute it to noopept, but I do feel like it has been of help. The next big usage is for people who may be looking to stay woke, stay energized throughout the day. Obviously there's lots of natural ways to do this, exercise, drink water, but if you're doing those methods already and you want to try something new, noopept might be a nice alternative to caffeine. It works on a different part of the brain to caffeine, so it could be a nice thing to cycle with caffeine. Alternatively, if you're someone who's you've turned to Adderall or something and you don't like the side effects of Adderall, this might be a nice alternative. And finally, the big area which kind of the research that's going on at the moment hasn't addressed fully yet is for socializing. So we could call this an alternative to alcohol or an alternative to, caffeine, whatever. So obviously if you suffer from anxiety, this might be something, but maybe just for people generally. I sometimes struggle with getting my words out. I've got quite a slow brain naturally. So I think noopept helps with my, verbal acrobatics. Helps me flow in my conversation, and I think it makes me less passive, less self-censoring. And I don't need to give the disclaimers about, you shouldn't be relying on a substance to socialize, but it's something to try out for yourself. Some final words. So stacking noopept. Noopept does appear to be safe to stack with racetams, other nootropics, maybe, like choline such as, alpha GPC, and there are limited reports of serious drug interactions, so it's something to talk to your doctor about, but it does appear to be safe so far. Next piece of advice is, if you're going to buy the powder instead of capsules, do make sure you invest in a scale, because it's really hard to get the dosage right just by eyeballing it. Scales cost a couple pounds or something. I got mine on eBay, maybe £4. And with noopept, even a small difference like 10 milligrams makes a huge difference to your experience. So definitely invest in scale. Another thing to mention is that dosage effects are bimodal. So in other words, 5 mg and 20 mg might be ineffective for you, but then you might find some sweet spot of 15 mg, which is just right. So more is not necessarily more, and less is not necessarily less. Another thing to say is that lots of people have reported that they feel that noopept is more helpful when used continuously over several days. It's hard to say what's happening here. Me personally, I do think a lot of it might be psychological. They have expectations once they get into a routine of how they're going to feel, so then the placebo effect takes over. Hard to say. And then probably the biggest piece of advice that you can tell anyone when it comes to any kind of drugs, apart from do research, is to take breaks. So the literature indicates that maybe after 1 to 2 months, the user should stop for a few weeks to allow their brain systems to return to balance. I would say, again, this is something to play around for. I just don't think that taking any kind of substance day after day for months on end is going to be good for you. So maybe it's something that you could do on the weekdays and then take weekends off, something like that. And then to finish, the one thing that needs to be said is this is not going to lift your IQ. Just as people who are, taking a bunch of Adderall and then maybe they get that promotion, maybe they get the best grade that they've ever got so far, and then they maybe credit it to Adderall. It didn't make you smarter, obviously. That's been proven already. It's just helping you to work longer, and it's helping you get into that flow state more quickly. So yeah, it's not gonna give you anything that you don't already have, but it does seem to help your mind focus its energy into analyzing information in a more continuous fashion. Don't expect the world from it, and as with all drugs, you'll get from it what you put into it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day.